Hey everyone, Sigil here. So it's been a minute as real life and gaming has pulled me in many different directions, but I haven't given up on this project and we're going to get back after it. So here we are with our second pair of characters at level 5 and we need to eliminate someone. As I mentioned previously, I do know that level 5 is pretty low for Everquest overall, but it does seem to be long enough for me to get a feel for the character personas that I'm building, if not fully the class mechanics. Alright, so today we're going to compare Vaelerion, the high-born, high-elf pyromaniac, and Sinnic, the low-born, half-elven assassin with lofty goals. We're going to pick a winner in each of our 5 categories to see who moves on to the next round, going up against Relic, the Ixar Shaman, who won the first round. Relic's a fan favorite. What kind of a name is Guggen? Get serious. And we'll definitely want to see more of him going forward. So to get started, I'll put the categories up here on screen and then we'll go through them one by one with a quick discussion and pick our winner. The first 4 categories are based entirely on my own opinion and with a smattering of factual evidence, but not much. The last category is a YouTube audience vote that I've had up for quite a while now, and we'll see how the vote lines up with my picks. Let's get to it. Alright, so we're going to look at race fantasy, class fantasy, starting zone, the persona that I built for the character, and then the results of the community vote, which will be our tiebreaker if needed. Alright, let's talk about race fantasy. So Vaelerion being a high elf, that's a perfect fit. High elf is one of the best races overall for magicians. They've got that high intelligence starting out, with a big mana pool, and that's going to be huge because we rely on casting spells across the board. That high intelligence is balanced out by having a low starting strength and stamina. Strength, I guess that means they suck at melee, but really who cares? We're just here to burn anyway. So what really hurts is with the strength is that they can't carry very much and will become encumbered really quickly. I don't know, maybe I need to hire some servants to carry my stuff around or something. With the low stamina, it means they have lower health, but that's why we have pets. We'll let the pet tank for us. We shouldn't be taking ourselves anyway. As a bonus, they also get infravision, which lets them see better in the dark. And that's going to be huge when we get to places where there's no lighting source. We won't really have to go out and find our own lighting source, like a Greater Lightstone or something. We can just kind of see pretty well in the dark as it is. So overall, I think the high elves in Everquest, they have a pretty good high fantasy, majestic feel, and they seem to kind of embody the typical fantasy high elf look and attitude of being better than everyone.
We're better than you, and we know it.
But personally, I think high elves in pretty much every genre are just big dorks. They're all like, oh, we were once so powerful and ruled the world, but we have dwindled over time and the human cockroaches have spread everywhere. And Everquest is pretty much the same. However, I will say they do have a pretty deep racial lore, and I love the look and feel of Felwith and the high magic theme. I just wish they weren't such cringy nerds. Alright, let's talk about Sinnic, the half-elf. So in most fantasy stories and games, the half-elf is usually a pretty versatile race. It combines some of the best things of both human and elf into one character. Usually with some kind of stigma of not being accepted as human or elf. Always has that kind of outsider vibe, which I actually think is pretty cool for a rogue who was kind of a child of the streets and then was kind of adopted into the Thieves Guild. So I think that plays well overall. Stat-wise, they start with pretty good agility and dexterity, which is good for avoidance because you can dodge, and then helping with some of the skill effectiveness. So like in our case, melee, all of our melee skills, which are going to be great. Half-elves also get infravision, so that's kind of a wash between the two. The high elf and the half-elf both get infravision, so again, gives us a lot of ability to navigate in dark places. Now, looks-wise, I think in classic Everquest, the half-elf armor models, especially the helm, is overall one of the best looks. I would argue that other than ogres, who are by far the best looking, half-elves and dark elves are probably neck and neck for best looking a race overall. One awesome thing about half-elves is they can have beards, and I think that's amazing. Even if they're small ones, it's a huge difference, huge differentiator overall. So they really have that going for them. In addition, they've got good alignment and faction flexibility kind of across the board, especially since Sinnic is an agnostic rogue, so he doesn't have to deal with any of the religion issues either. So I would say overall, the half-elf is pretty well-rounded, looks really good. It's kind of the jack of all trades and the master of swagger. But lore-wise, I think it's kind of lacking in EverQuest overall, but it does give good starting stats for the rogue. Pretty easy to navigate through most factions, and then, like I said, it looks good, and we all know that looking good is the most important thing in an MMO. All right, so our final verdict for race fantasy, I am going to go with the half elf. I'm going to go with Sinnic, the street rat. As much as I appreciate the deep lore and the background of the high elves, I still can't help but see them as the big dorks that they are. So I'm going to go with half elf for this one. All right, so let's talk about class fantasy. Now, the Magician is a very pet-based class, so they get the elemental pets, give you kind of a variety of options for tanking and damage. So far, I've really only played with the fire pet, and it was absolutely amazing. The nice thing about pets is they continue to do damage even without you spending any mana, which gives you very little downtime, because while the pet is fighting, you can just meditate or sit and regain mana, and the pet does the fighting for you as long as they can survive the encounter. The difference in how fast I was able to kill things before I got the pet at level 4 and after was just insane. The fire pet was just tearing things up. We had zero downtime. It went so fast. Level 4 to level 5 went so fast compared to the other ones. It was pretty amazing. If needed, the Earth Pet could even off-tank to some extent in like a group content, although I haven't tried that out myself yet. This is my first mage. I'm actually ever leveling in Everquest. Because the Magician is so pet dependent and pet oriented, they actually have a very low gear dependency, which is really nice. Even naked, you could summon a pet and still do pretty good damage, still do really good damage. On top of all the advantages of having the pet, mages also have some of the highest nuke damage in the game with their fire and magic-based spells, and we're really leaning into that fire-based genre of spells with Vaelerion as he's turning out to be something of a pyromaniac. So overall, it's really cool. The whole Master of the Elements thing is very cool, and it really fits into that pyromaniac idea for Vaelerion. Beyond pets, mages can summon a whole bunch of useful items: pet armor, weapons, mod rods, food and water, bags, temporary bags. Unfortunately, they don't. The kind of the downside to them is they don't have any crowd control other than maybe just murdering everything in sight, since your pet is so strong, and they actually don't have any direct heal for themselves or for the pet. So in the event that your pet is going to die, you really need to like create some distance to summon a new pet is really your only method. So I'd say overall, the Magician, it's very powerful, very straightforward. You don't have to worry about a lot of positioning or anything like that. Their strengths definitely outweigh their weaknesses in almost all content, as long as you like pet classes. That's the one caveat. All right, so with Sinnic the Rogue, we're looking at a completely different play style. It's just unmatched when it comes to melee DPS. You've got backstab, you've got dual wield, you've got double attack, you have zero dependency on mana, so your ability to sustain that high damage never ends. It just goes on indefinitely, and this makes them really group and raid friendly, which is awesome. You get hide and sneak, and those two together basically gives you perfect invisibility. No one even comes close to the rogue's ability to explore while invis or to perform a corpse recovery. It's not even close. Sneak and hide doesn't randomly fade like other invis spells. It's super reliable, so you are the premier class for those abilities. The nice thing about Rogue also is that it has a pretty low gear dependency at low levels, although of course they scale awesome with a good piercing weapon. Now that definitely changes at higher levels. Their damage really scales with weapon quality later, but at low levels we wouldn't be too reliant on trying to get an awesome weapon as soon as we could. Just anything that we can stab with is going to work well for us. Now, one downside is there really requires a lot of positional awareness with the Rogue, because backstab only works from behind your target, and that can get really difficult to keep up with in chaotic fights. And it is a difference from other classes, mage, where you just kind of send the pet in and blow things up, and it doesn't matter if you're standing behind him, in front of him, to the side, or anything like that. So it's good that rogues are really wanted in groups and raids, because maybe the other downside for them is they have pretty low survivability on their own. They're kind of fragile with a low armor class, no real way to heal themselves, so they're really reliant on the group play, unlike the mage, who can solo really well. So I'd say overall, if you want to do massive damage, sneak through dungeons, be a corpse recovery expert, and just be a deadly assassin, the Rogue's an amazing choice overall. Okay, so both classes were great, but my choice for overall class fantasy is going to go to Vaelerion, the Magician. I just can't get enough of those fire spells and the fire pet tearing things up. All right, so next up we're going to talk about starting zone. So with Vaelerion, he started in Felwith, which is a pretty cool starting city. It feels like, a solid walled city, but one that was carefully kind of inclusive of the nature that surrounded it. And it has like a sparkly, lawful good feel to it. Magical portals in there and stuff. Is pretty cool. So there are vendors inside the city, but pretty close to the entrance, although it is quite a hike to get to the caster trainers and vendors in the far back of the city. There are zones that have done that a little better, in my opinion, but it wasn't terrible. And then getting outside, the Greater Feydark, it's a great newbie zone. Lots of options, and it covers a pretty good range of levels. So far with Vaelerion, I've only stayed near Felwith itself, like near the entrance there, but soon I'd have the opportunity to go out and try some new things, higher level things like Orc Hill, and then Crushbone, where we can pick up some Orc belts and we can turn those in for experience. And Crushbone's super close within the zone, and it's one of the best low-level dungeons in the game. Has some good loot drops in it. Kelethin is also in the Greater Feydark, the Wood Elf starting city up in the treetops, which to me is maybe the coolest city in the entire game. So overall, I really liked the density and the diversity of all the mobs to hunt in the newbie area. I didn't see very many other players around during my playtime, so it was all mine to pick and choose from. I really love how Felwith looks when you're running up to it, coming out of the dark woods. It's like this bastion of light with this white stone wall and the high elf guard standing there. I do wish there were some vendors outside right outside in the Greater Fey, and possibly there are some, and I just didn't run across them in my limited travels, but that's a very minor complaint. Overall, really cool starting zone. And then with Sinnic, I started in Kanos, and this might be an unpopular opinion, I'm not sure, but I love starting in Kanos. For me, that's like a ton of nostalgia there. I spent a lot of time in actual classic Everquest in Kanos with a couple of different characters. My first character ever was a barbarian who immediately drowned because I didn't know how to swim, but my second character was a half-elf bard, and I loved Kanos compared to the Frozen North. I don't know where I stand on that today. I kind of like both starting zones today, but at the time it seemed so much more, understandable and doable. With Kanos, you get a lot of cool things. You get this great quest density with a bunch of different groups within the city. There's a ton of things to go out and retrieve and turn in for some faction or some armor or some money. There's political intrigue and a range of good to evil or morally great groups all throughout the city. It's really awesome. It's very, very well built. With the Kanos Yard right out front, you have a built-in starting zone right within a city. You don't need to zone over to sell things or to turn in your quests. Kanos Yard's awesome, has a huge density of mobs. They're just everywhere. Like if you actually had a city that had that many monsters and critters walking around in the front, you'd probably have some kind of problem. It also has easy progression. If you run out of the Kanos things that kill in the Kanos Yard, you just run out to the Kanos Hills, and then you've got Blackburrow right there. I love Blackburrow. I think it's a great dungeon. Speaking of Blackburrow, you've got the ever iconic Darkpaw clan and their shenanigans out there in the Kanos Yard. 50 Darkpaw always making his run towards the guards. Someday he's going to get them. I'd say eventually you get kind of isolated from the world being in Kanos because you're on the far east and you've got the Karanas between you and basically everything else. So to get over to the East Common Lands or Freeport, you've got to do that famous across the world run. But overall, I really love starting in Kanos. I think it's one of the best starting zones to me in the game. So having said all that, I think you can guess where my vote goes here, but I am going to stick with Sinnic and starting in Kanos. Like I said, maybe an unpopular opinion, but it is my favorite starting zone. All right, Persona. So with Vaelerion, as I noted earlier, I'm not a huge fan of the high elf fantasy. So when I was thinking about how I wanted to play him, I figured I would just lean into that and make him completely insufferable, just overwhelmingly annoying to start out. But I also thought about how I could have fun with him, and the idea of him discovering that he's a pyromaniac came to mind. I love the idea that this annoying floozy who embodies all the worst traits of the aristocracy could become obsessed with fire and maybe actually become a powerful adventurer. It actually turned out better than I had imagined, and I ended up having a blast playing him out. So his story is a pretty basic, flimsy fantasy trope, become an adventurer and prove yourself, which leaves it open to a lot of interpretations, and I think there's a huge amount of room to explore his personal growth along the way. It's a lot of fun to play. Now with Sinnic, speaking of common fantasy tropes, how about the old cast-out orphan street rat who wants to become famous and powerful?
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
I struggled for a while with finding a voice for Sinnic. My really terrible New Yorkerish B-movie mob accent could have worked here, but I actually didn't like it when I tried it out. So I decided to create something a little different with kind of almost what looks like a witness protection interview with future Sinnic, and I think it worked out pretty well. So Sinnic has some distinct goals set out that I can work with going forward, and I think there would really be neat to have the video timeline kind of catch up with the future interview timeline eventually. And there's even some hinted at drama with Tubal Weaver, that bastard, mixed in there. There's a lot of fun things that I could do with this character. So for all the categories so far, I think this one was the hardest one for me to make a final decision. I really like what I've created with both characters. But in the end, I'm going to go with Vaelerion because I'm really interested in playing out his personal growth, and also just the whole idea of role-playing that pyromaniac in groups and stuff sounds like a lot of fun to me. So that's going to bring us to a true tiebreaker using the community vote. And as you can see here, Vaelerion won 62% to 38% out of the 13 votes we received. We got a few more votes this time than we did last time, and hopefully that continues to grow as people are interested. So overall, Vaelerion is our winner and will be moving forward. So with that, Sinnic, the half-elf rogue, is eliminated from our competition, and Vaelerion, the high-elf magician, gets to move forward to round 2. In round 2, he'll be up against Relic the XR Shaman, and I'm really looking forward to playing both those characters again. But next up, we have Darindril, our Dark Elf Cleric, going up against Xeris, our Erudite Enchanter. I'm really looking forward to introducing you to both of those characters soon. If you've liked the series so far, go ahead and give those YouTube buttons a nudge so you can be alerted when the next one comes out, and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.
Worldwide, level up, let's rise and play. Through the night and into the day, from the pixels to the stars above, gaming together with